What's up, Dragon Brood? So y'all know I was gonna have to try because it's here, and there's a landfall list we're covering today. Now, it is Gruul, might be the best way to play landfall, may not be. We'll find out, I don't know. But we're gonna push the land count even less than we did with the Orzhov Clerics deck, which maybe if I remember I can put the link in this video so you can find it. But this is gonna be a lot of damage real fast if it works. Don't know if that's a big if, but if it does, this is going to be exciting and it's going to be a fun list to talk about. But you know what I'm going to ask before we get into it? Remember to like this video. That helps us get in front of more people. Hitting that subscription bell or subscription button lets me know that you love what I'm doing and appreciate these deck lists. And when you hit the subscription bell, that makes sure that you get notified every time I have a video up so you don't miss one of these deck lists, as we're going to be putting out a couple a day leading up to Zendikar Rising. But for now, let's go take a look at this Gruul Landfall deck. Alright, so this is going to be a fun one to talk about. I know a lot of people have been looking like, want to play Landfall, how do I build it? What direction should I be taking it? I don't even know if this is exactly the best path to follow, but I do think it's at least a very good starting point. The only thing, like I said, like I pointed out kind of in the opener there, is that we may be too low on lands, because we do still want to be able to hit cards on time, especially up to about turn 3. But let's take a look and see. So we're going to start at the top here with Akum Hellhound. The card's good. We're playing 4 copies. It's just 1 red, 0/1. Every time you have a land come into play, it gets +2/+2. So you're going to be attacking with the 2/3 pretty easily, at least through the first 3 or 4 turns most likely. And that's going to be kind of hard for your opponent to deal with. Now, it is an 0/1 the rest of the time, which is a liability, but that's kind of the trade-off whenever you're trying to play landfall stuff. I was looking for other 1-drops to play, and there aren't really a lot to fit this type of deck, because you don't want anything like Swarm Shambler, and something in the lines of like a Stone Coral Serpent don't really fit this type of list. So you end up here on the Wildwood Tracker, right? It gets to be a 2/2 because you're going to have a non-human pretty much everything that you're playing. So you're going to have plenty of things to make it into a 2/2, and that kind of fits with the theme of the rest of the deck for the early attackers on the 1 mana being an extra power up. So should be okay, but if it were to get changed down the road, I wouldn't be surprised. We are playing a couple of the Skyclave Pickaxe, and this is one I debated a little bit, but the truth is it comes into play equipped, and that's kind of hard to beat. Especially, you know, you can say you can turn 1 Akum Hellhound, and then follow up with this on the next turn plus a creature, so now you're attacking for 4. You know, like that's a lot of early damage really fast. I mean, if you can have something dealing 4 an attack on those early stages, I mean, it really becomes a creature your opponent can't take a turn off. They kind of have to deal with it. So if this turns out to be a good card in this type of list, we may go up to 4, because just 1 mana to be able to give your creature landfall is pretty big. Now, here's a card I'm experimenting with, and this is kind of, if the deck were to change to play 4 of the Pickaxe, I might try to find a way to go up to 4 of the Fireblade Charger. It's only 1 red for a 1/1. If it's equipped, it has haste, so if you can play it and then get the Skyclave Pickaxe on it, or you can go ahead and attack for more power, which is kind of nice, and you get to attack with haste. But the bigger benefit is when it dies, it also deals damage equal to its power. So in some ways, like if you think the board's going to get swept or whatever, you can actually equip it, get some extra damage out of it. You can attack. If they're blocking it with anything that's a 2 toughness or less, you can effectively kill it. And the other big thing is it deals damage to any target. So you can target a planeswalker or the opponent. It doesn't just have to be a creature. Now, this is a fun card here, the Brushfire Elemental. It's a red and a green for a 1/1. It has haste, which we like. Can't be blocked by a creature with power 2 or less. And that's very big, because I kind of glossed over that. Like, I knew the words existed on the card, but when I was first thinking about it, I was like, okay, these words may not matter that much. But realistically, if you're playing it on turn 2 or 3 early, oftentimes your opponents don't have creatures that are bigger than, or any bigger than 2 power, right? And think about it against the control decks. What are some of their favorite cards to play? You know, stuff like Omen of the Sun, that just makes 1/1s, right? They can't block it. If they're playing Birth of Meletis and they make the 0/4 token, right, they can't block it. So that makes a big deal on a card like this. There are some times this card alone might be able to get things done. It's a 1/1, but it does have landfall, so it can go up to being a 3/3. Not anything to turn your nose up at. This card actually might turn out to be better than I originally were giving it the respect of when I saw it on the list. So, Shatter Skull Smashing. With it being like, you're not often going to use the ability to split the damage. Like, it gives you the option to divide as you choose up to 2 targets. But most of the time, you're probably going to spend the damage and put it on just a single target. So this isn't going to be the most efficient removal spell, but it is a removal spell that the deck can play. And again, because you're trying to finish the game quickly anyway and come out the gate early, paying the 3 life to have this come into play untapped as just effectively a mountain is actually okay. You shouldn't be too hindered by this unless it's just one of those cases where you're up against, say, maybe mono red or a super aggressive green deck, and you've been beat down and you end up needing to put this into play untapped on turn 4, then it's going to be a little bit of a pain. Now, people are going to look at this and say, why is Galea in this list? And I'm going to tell you, I really thought about how this deck could run out of steam, right? Like, maybe you end up getting some lands, you get your stuff in, and your opponent's still at like 5 or 6, right? And you don't have any more lands to expend or anything for your landfall triggers. This lets you get extra cards in your hand. So basically, you may just be running Galea in as a way to trigger and see if you can drop something from your hand you don't need, like maybe a late Akuma Hellhound or something, or another tracker, and turn it into 2 cards. Because you have so many options to hit in this deck that could be worth it. You know, you're just trying to find an extra land or 2 sometimes at that stage of the game. She also does have haste, so it's not an irrelevant thing. But again, maybe that's the wrong card. You know, there's a future I can easily see where Galea is another copy of Fireblade Charger and a Sky Pickaxe, right? Or a Skyclave Pickaxe. I guess I can call it Sky Pickaxe. You know what I'm talking about. But anyway, maybe those what the cards actually should be. But we're at like the experimental stages of Standard, so I'm willing to try some things. And we're playing a couple copies of Rada Heart of Keld, because again, Rada lets you play stuff off the top of the deck, which we love. So if you can play extra lands off the top, that triggers all your stuff, and then you get to attack with Rada, also being a first striker, so no hate there at all. But we don't have a ton of lands. You know, that's the other half of it, right? Like, because while the cards are on top of your deck, you know, it's like, interesting. But with Rada, I believe the way it works, because it says you may look at the top card of your library, and you may play lands from the top of your library. So since it's actually playing the card and not just putting it into play, I believe you can actually look at the card, see if it's a land, and then you can use it and put it into play. So something just be aware of on Rada versus something like, say, Uro that just says put a land card from your hand into play. The front sides are what count for the card. So the fact that it's not a land on the front means you can't put it into play with Uro. But Rada says you can play a land, you know, and that card can be either or. So it's nuanced magic. But yeah, if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. So here we're playing Bone Crusher Giant. This doesn't really fit in with the theme at all, really, as far as being a landfall card. But we need some removal cards, right? We can't lean on the Shatter Skull smashing because it takes just more mana. We may not have that sometimes. And this sometimes just getting a small blocker out of the way, or maybe something big blocks one of our 2 or 3 power things. We can finish it off with the Bone Crusher Giant. But we mostly want the stomp more than we want the creature, I would think, in this type of list. I'm playing 3 Skyclave Geopedes, and I'm not really sure how many I should be playing. I felt like maybe 2 was the right number, but I don't know, maybe 4 is the right number. It's a 3/1 for 3. It does trample. Your landfall trigger means it's going to be a 5 power, which is important when it tramples. So maybe it's the right thing. It's the 1 toughness, I think, on a 3 mana creature that bothers me. But maybe I'm just thinking about it wrong, and I shouldn't worry about that, because that's not really the concern of this deck. We're also playing Kazandu Mammoths. We're playing 4 of these. And the backside comes into play tapped as a green source. 3 mana, 3/3, landfall gives you +2/+2. You're going to be attacking with the 5/5 a lot, but even just playing a 3/3 for 3 is going to be reasonable in this type of deck. You know, in the first couple of turns, you might be able to sneak in some real damage, and then you back it up with this thing. It's nothing to be too upset about, and it's a sizable creature, whereas we're looking, you know, we're paying 3 for a 3/3 here, whereas with the Geopede, you're paying 3 for a 3/1. They both get the same effect from landfall, only the other one tramples, but this also doubles as a land. So it's kind of a toss-up, but obviously we like the Mammoth more. Also probably why it's a rare versus being an uncommon. Questing Beast, I know it's a cop-out, but we're playing green. You got to play Questing Beast. There's not, I mean, can't really complain. I mean, it's the best 4-mana thing possibly green's ever had. So we got to go with it. We are playing a full set of Embercleaves because, again, we're loading up on creatures. We should almost always have the ability to trigger Embercleave for at least 3. Maybe can get it down to 2, but almost always you should be able to play this for 3 with very little issue. We're playing 1 Moralic Fury of Akum, 4 colorless, 2 red for 6/6. Each creature you control has a +1/+1 for each time it has already attacked this turn. Landfall is when a land enters the battlefield under your control. If it's your main phase, you get an additional combat phase after that one. At the beginning of combat, you untap all your creatures, so basically it's to attack again. So this is huge in the case you have something like a Fabled Passage. You get an extra attack step. You go to attack, do your thing. You're back in your main phase. Like, it's just so amazing. You don't even go back to your main phase, you just go back to combat. But you get stack combat steps. So each time your attackers are also going to be +1. So it's like, this is a pretty powerful card. Now it does cost 6, and we don't have a way to trick it into play or do anything cheaper, which is why we're only playing 1. But it is the best thing you can do with landfall. So if for some reason the board gets stalled and maybe it's a creature fight and you just need to get a couple more points through, this could be the card that allows that to happen. And then we're playing Turn Timber Symbiosis. I think you're going to see in a lot of these lists, especially for the next probably 3 to 4 months while we're figuring this out, well, at least for the next 6 weeks, that we're going to be playing a lot of these higher end cards because you just pay the 3 life, they come in untapped, and it's almost like just straight up replacing a land. Almost like playing shock lands that we're just leaving in Ravnica at this point. But it's a 7-mana card. Let you look at the top 7 cards. You can take a creature, put it into play. If it's 3 or less, it gets 3 +1/+1s. If it's larger, it just comes into play. Does what it does. You put the rest on the bottom of your deck. Don't really care too much about that part. It's a cool recovery card. We'd rather draw this late in the game than draw, like, land number 8, 9, 10, whatever it is. But this actually gives you the option of being able to go find a creature, which is a good thing, especially when you're looking at 7 cards, because being able to hit something like a Questing Beast or whatever could be game ending. Lands, we're playing the Crag Crown Pathways, which are forest on one side effectively, mountains on the other. Playing a full set of Fabled Passages because, you want to kind of trigger landfall as best you can. And then we're playing 2 forests and 3 mountains. And that's kind of crazy, right? Because you're looking at saying, like, there's only really 9 lands, 9 basics that come into play on tap, then some Fabled Passages. But we do also have the Turn Timber Symbiosis, which is another 3, so that brings you up to 12. And then you have the Shatter Skull Smashing, which is another 4, so that brings you up to 16 lands that come into play untapped. And then you also have Kazandu Mammoth, which is another 4, so those come into play tapped. So that's already 20 lands, plus you have the original 4 Fabled Passages. So you have 24 mana sources, when the majority of your deck kind of falls in the 1 and 2-ish kind of range, which should be fine. But again, we're taking a real chance pushing these mana, I don't know, I'd say the land counts as low as we can push them and see how much we get punished by having the lands that come into play tapped. Now, I'm sure some of y'all are saying, like, where's the Wayward Guide Beast? Guide Beast. It's a 2/2 for 1, so you know what card I'm talking about. It does have Trample and Haste. Every time you deal damage to the opponent, you pick up a land, or you have to return a land you control to your hand. The card's solid. Let me double check. Let me make sure. I don't want to give you all the wrong thing, because if it's optional, actually I should have it in here, but I'm pretty sure you have to. So whenever Wayward Guide Beast deals damage to a player, return a land. Yeah, it's not a may, so you just have to return it. And that's the reason I think I left it off the list, because we want to be able to continue to advance our board, play extra things. We do have some things that cost 3 that are important, and we don't necessarily want to just forego those. And if we get it on turn 1 or 2, hitting our opponent for a couple of points isn't as good as it would be just getting our 2 and 3 mana things down and doing extra damage, because it's likely going to get stopped after turn 2 anyway, and then we've just set ourselves back a turn for no real reason. I mean, if we had some extra ways to discard the lands or do something fun with them, I probably would consider it, but I don't think it's the card for this list, unfortunately. But the rest of this list I really like. Why don't you let me know down in the comments below some things that you're trying right now with Landfall, and we can discuss it. Also, don't forget the deck list will be down below, and there's a good chance this list will change. So, take it with a grain of salt. This is all kind of experimentation until we get into the first couple of days where we can actually put these theories to use. And remember, if you haven't, like this video because that's going to help us get seen by more people. Hit the subscribe button because that lets me know that you appreciate all this work that's going into making these decks and making the videos. And finally, hit the subscription bell that's right next to that button because it lets you know every time I have a video up. And right now we're going to be having multiple videos coming out every day talking about decks for Zendikar Rising Standard until we get to the release of Zendikar. Whew, that's all we have for you for now. We'll see you next time.